Bienvenidos to Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. I'm Michael Puente, reporter with WBEZ Chicago. On the show tonight, after nearly 12,000 migrants have arrived in Chicago, we're one-on-one with the city's first ever deputy mayor to oversee immigrant, migrant, and refugee rights. Addressing Humboldt Park's growing homeless encampment and potential long-term solutions. A lawsuit filed against Northwestern in connection to the school's hazing scandal claims racial discrimination of a former player's Mexican heritage. And memories of growing up in Puerto Rico influenced the artwork of a rising Chicago artist. All that coming up, but our first story tonight, Brandis Friedman and the city's first ever deputy mayor of immigrant, migrant, and refugee rights. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, is made possible in part by the support of these donors.
Chicago officials say the city has welcomed a bus full of migrants nearly every day since the beginning of July, making up almost 12,000 people, mostly from Central and South America. Meanwhile, hundreds of migrant men, women, and children remain sleeping on police station floors despite efforts to move them into shelters. City officials and community organizers are working to feed, clothe, and care for the migrants while also finding permanent housing. Here to discuss the city's plan on this and more is Beatriz Ponce de Leon, Chicago's deputy mayor of immigrant, migrant, and refugee rights, a newly created position. Prior to this role, Ponce de Leon was working for the Illinois Department of Human Services. Deputy Mayor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
So, as we've been covering, migrants were recently relocated from a police station this week to the Broadway Armory in Edgewater following protests in that community. What timeline does the city have in moving those people who are still sleeping at police stations to shelters and more permanent housing?
The timeline is now. We are working diligently across the city to expand our shelters, looking first and foremost at our city-owned properties and then also creating new opportunities. We know that the police stations are a temporary place, and we know that the best move is to have individuals staying at shelters where they can receive a full assortment of services and resources that'll help put them on a path to resettlement. So it is really all hands on deck, and every day as buses come, we are doing our best to move people as quickly as we can from police into shelter.
Many people are citing it's been a slow process. You know, we were just reporting just last week, still several hundred people sleeping in police stations. Obviously, some are being moved now. What challenges is your office up against? What's the delay?
Yes, thank you for asking that, Brandis, because really the challenges are tremendous. This is a humanitarian crisis. As you noted at the beginning, we have welcomed over 12,000 people since last year, and we're coming up to the one-year anniversary of when the first bus arrived here. The buses are being sent by the governor of Texas. We have no control over the buses. Folks are arriving at Chicago's doorstep, and we're a welcoming city, so we're doing our best to welcome our new neighbors, to treat people with dignity, to help put them on a path where they can resettle here in the city. We are right now at about 5,900 individuals in our city shelters, and every day a new bus arrives. So if I just want to give you some context, from January to now, we've had 77 buses. Of those 77, 69 have arrived since May, when this administration took over. And as you noted, it's been about one a day since July. So on any given bus, we have 40 to 50 individuals. Some are singles, many are families. And as soon as they arrive, we move them into our police stations, and then as quickly as we can, we move them into our shelters. We've vetted over 200 locations for possible shelters, again, focusing first on our city-owned properties, but also looking to potentially lease or purchase properties. And the sooner that we can open more shelters across the city, the faster we will be able to move individuals and families into those shelters. We're also very appreciative. Yes.
Well, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned vetting over 200 locations. Give us a sense of what some of these locations are. We've talked about, we know that some folks have been using the city colleges, but those shelters have had to be shifted because students are returning back to school. What are some of the other locations you're looking at?
That's correct. And so we are looking at our city properties. That includes parks and city colleges and other, some of our unused or closed schools. In addition, we are looking at properties, for example, motels have been recommended, or nursing homes, or different locations where we can have at least 200 to 250 people. Not all locations, the vast majority, are not viable options. They need to have enough space for about 200 to 250. They need to have adequate plumbing, bathroom space, ability to either set up showers or bring mobile showers, and spaces for people to be able to congregate, eat, have some common areas. And so as we look at those places throughout the city, we bring a team from the city to vet them, to see if they're adequate, and then when they have been, we're able to move on moving and opening them as shelter.
You're the first person to carry this role as deputy mayor. How do you plan to address this crisis, the migrant crisis specifically, differently from what we've seen previously?
I am really appreciative that this mayor had the vision and the courage to establish this position. Chicago has always been a city of immigrants, and to have a deputy mayor in this role at this moment is critical. I think the role is to help bring strategic leadership and guidance on our operations, bringing together the different teams that are already in play. We partner very closely with OEMC, with DFSS, with other city agencies and departments. My role will be to help craft strategy that is longer term with those with those organizations, city agencies and departments, as well as with others in the mayor's office. And I think also long term, this position is about looking at how we can live our vision to be a welcoming city. So what does it look like for our city agencies and departments to make the Welcoming City Ordinance a reality in those spaces? And what can our city, beyond the agencies and the departments, our different sectors, the public sector, philanthropy, business, do to help long-term immigrant integration activities and processes across our different sectors in Chicago? I'm excited to have the opportunity to help lead that with others here on our team. We also want to look at how the city creates a hub of resources and information around immigration and immigrant integration that others can turn to in Chicago, and that they would want to join us in these efforts.
There's also the long work permit process for the new arrivals. What other economic barriers are there in the meantime, and how can that be addressed? And while we're on it, the city has also given out 6 months of rental assistance for migrants. I guess give me sort of a long-term sense of how things are going to go.
Sure. The rental assistance has been a collaboration, both the city and the state, and we are grateful to that, those appropriations. It is on a path to help people in their resettlement efforts. We know that we can continue to do that for the time being. We have, that is part of the plan in terms of resettling folks, and we will continue to do that. I think in terms of creating that pipeline of movement, that is something that we are still looking at the strategy for how we support immigrants as they move out and become self-sufficient and resettled. At the federal level, we are working with our federal delegations to see what types of activities can be taking place federally. This is not a local issue only. Cities typically don't have to respond as hands-on and as on such a wide scale as Chicago and other cities have. And we definitely are looking for our federal partners to step in and to help support this effort.
A few seconds left. Aside from receiving asylum seekers and managing this immediate crisis, what are some of the other issues that's important for you to address related to immigration and refugee rights as a part of your position?
I am looking forward to partnering with so many of the community-based organizations that do immigration policy and that advocate for immigrants, migrants, and refugees. I think looking at things like work authorizations, backlog of immigration processes, looking nationally as well at what other cities and what other national organizations are doing. I think it's important that we have this role and this office to take a proactive approach to advocating for immigrants, migrants, and refugees in Chicago.
Okay, that's where we'll have to leave it. We look forward to having you back to discuss more of these issues going forward. Deputy Mayor Beatriz Ponce de Leon, thank you.
Thank you so much, Brandis.
And up next, Michael Puente and the growing homeless encampment in Humboldt Park. Stay with us.
The Humboldt Park community has a growing homeless encampment in its namesake park. It's raising concerns for some residents and prompting local officials to find long-term solutions. But it's also not an issue particular to Humboldt Park. According to the Chicago Coalition of the Homeless, more than 65,000 Chicagoans are currently unhoused. Joining us now with more on this are Alderperson Jesse Fuentes of the 26th Ward, Bruce Perry with the Illinois Union of the Homeless, and Cook County Commissioner Anthony Quesada of the 8th District, which includes parts of Humboldt Park. Alderperson Fuentes, let's start with you. You've met with many of the folks living in the tents in your ward. What are you hearing from them?
Absolutely. I think that first, the survey that we did at the tent encampment was going there to speak to these individuals on a one-on-one basis so that they feel humanized and dignified, and that there wasn't one broad stroke of stereotypes that were tagged to them, but rather I was there to affirm their lived experiences. And their needs are diverse. We have individuals in that tent encampment who are veterans, who have served this country, who cannot afford to live in the city of Chicago. We have individuals who were evicted promptly after COVID. We have individuals who have historical and generational trauma and need the wraparound supports. And so that interview and that time to be able to have those relationships and restore that trust with our unhoused neighbors was important, because we know a one-size-fits-all solution is not going to work here.
Now, Bruce, your organization works with the homeless population. How has this issue gotten bigger since COVID?
There's no question that the number of encampments throughout the city have increased, and each of the encampments has increased in size. We're seeing more and more homeless people. The economy is actually generating poverty and generating at the worst aspect of poverty, which is homelessness. And we're seeing the direct results of that here in Chicago.
Commissioner Quesada, how are you seeing this issue grow, the issue of homelessness?
Well, clearly we're seeing it in our community, right? In our parks, under bridges, on our streets, on our transportation hubs and stations. I think we're also seeing it within our families. My own family is suffering from housing insecurity. During my election last year, I actually housed a friend of mine who was facing housing insecurity. So I think it's very pervasive. I think it's very persistent, and it's broad. The cost of living is increasing. Housing costs are increasing. Poverty is increasing. Wages are stagnant. I think a lot of people are at risk of becoming homeless, and a lot of people are already homeless.
Alderperson Fuentes, what solutions are you looking for in your ward to address homelessness?
There's a diverse amount of solutions that we are looking at today. We know one of the greatest concerns that we have in the 26th Ward, and the reason the tents continue to grow in the park, is because we do not have a 24-hour shelter nearby. These are individuals that are in our community, that have lived in this community. This is where they find home. This is where they find comfort. And the idea of having to leave that space, right, is further traumatizing. And so considering a shelter in the areas is one of the solutions. But we also know that we don't have enough affordable housing in the 26th Ward. And so continuing to build affordable housing is top priority for me, and partnering with the Department of Family Support Services to be able to provide those rapid housing events. We know strangers coming in and trying to provide those supports are not going to allow for folks to find comfort in retrieving those supports. And so I'm going to partner at every turn with the Department of Family Support Services to provide those resources to our community.
Oh, what kind of funding is needed to even make a dent in this problem?
Well, we need a permanent revenue source. We currently do not have a permanent revenue source that allows for us to build housing so that housing can become a right in the city of Chicago and not a privilege, right? And so that's why I am an advocate for Bring Chicago Home, which seeks to increase the real estate tax transfer on purchases for $1 million or more one time. That permanent revenue source will allow us the financial opportunity to build the housing that the city needs.
Now, Bruce, you work with a church right across the encampment. What other resources do the people in this encampment need?
Well, I think it's already been said, they need wraparound services all the way. I mean, the number one thing they need is permanent, safe, secure housing, and that's, that isn't there. And there's plenty of public housing that is vacant in this city, and we need to find out how to get the resources there to get those open. But there's also everything from food to clothing to personal items to mental health help to physical, to other medical help and legal help. There are people with legal questions as well. Just getting an ID can be a challenge that many of these unhoused face that keep them from getting into permanent housing.
Mr. Quesada, what other agencies have a role in addressing the homeless population?
Well, in the city of Chicago, as the alderperson said, is the Department of Family and Support Services. I'm currently working and exploring the different agencies and departments within Cook County that can help play a role in this. The alderperson and I are already looking at the different resources and assets that exist throughout the 8th District to identify spaces and parcels of land that can be used for affordable housing. So I'll be in communication with the Cook County Housing Authority and the Cook County Land Bank Authority to find out how we can build and spur more affordable housing development across the 8th District.
Alderperson Fuentes, you mentioned the Bring Chicago Home proposal. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Absolutely. Bring Chicago Home is a proposal by a coalition that seeks to increase the real estate tax transfer. We all pay a real estate tax transfer when we purchase a home. It seeks to increase that by 1.9% for individuals that are purchasing a home for $1 million or more. That revenue alone will allow us to dedicate resources to building more affordable and public housing, and there's also going to be an allocation that ensures that we are providing wraparound services to the individuals that do not have housing stability today, because we know providing a roof over their heads is not enough. Some individuals need wraparound case management, mental health support, substance abuse support. This fund will allow us to do both.
Commissioner Quesada, could you see this as a solution as well? And do you think there should also be sort of an adjoining proposal on the county level?
Absolutely. During the first subject matter hearing on Bring Chicago Home last, I think it was a week ago at the City Council, I attended the subject matter hearing, and I also sent a letter of support to all of the members of the City Council in support of the Bring Chicago Home ordinance. And I will be talking to my colleagues on the county board to explore other revenue sources that we can address for poverty and homelessness throughout suburban Cook County.
Now, Bruce, you shared with us that you were once homeless yourself. What was it that helped you find housing?
Actually, what happened, I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I have had PTSD, and that was an integral part of my becoming homeless. And I was very fortunate to have the VA stand behind me, and they actually sent me into a 3-month PTSD program in North Chicago, what was then North Chicago VA. And they paid me my disability during that period, and that got me out of homelessness after several months. But, those were very fortunate resources that I had available to me that aren't available to many of the homeless on the street. And I just want to add, being homeless is a brutal existence. And these are our friends, our neighbors, our families, and we need to get all of these people into permanent, secure housing. There's no question.
We got less than a minute right now. Alderperson Fuentes, let me ask you this. The Bring Chicago Home proposal, is there momentum to pass that? Is there any kind of desire? Do you see that passing?
Absolutely. I see the passage for us in City Council. It's obviously a priority of the mayor. What we are asking for today is to put the question on the ballot. We are not asking to increase the tax today. We are asking to put the question on the ballot and allow the people of Chicago the opportunity to pass the proposals themselves.
Well, our thanks to Alderperson Jesse Fuentes, Bruce Perry, and Anthony Quesada. Up next, allegations of racial discrimination in a new lawsuit filed against Northwestern University. Stay with us. Former college football player Ramon Diaz filed a lawsuit against Northwestern University this week. It's one of several lawsuits filed by former athletes that are related to hazing allegations in the school's athletic department. Diaz claims to have been subjected to hazing, sexual and physical abuse, and racial discrimination, saying his teammates shaved the word Cinco de Mayo on his back of his head, causing years of trauma and offense to his ethnicity and heritage.
I often ask myself, why that symbol? Why me? Could have chosen anything, and that's what you decided to do. Living on dirt floors is something I'm proud to talk about when I share with people the living conditions my father lived in Mexico. I'm proud to be my father's son, and I'm a Latino American. The harsh living conditions my father endured reminds me of the virtues he instilled into me. Character, integrity, and resiliency. Brett Ingalls, you insulted my family's cultural heritage. You said on many occasions that even though I grew up on dirt floors, we don't live like that here. Those words ring true to me like they happened yesterday. There's never been a day that's gone by since I graduated in 2008 where I have not forgotten those words. I've not seen a football game in over 10 years because of what happened to me. What would possess any human being, anyone, that's okay, that wouldn't ruin somebody's life, and it certainly did for me.
Ramon Diaz's case dates back to 2005 and 2008. Also this week, Northwestern leaders announced plans to hire former U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch to lead an independent review of the university's reporting process for misconduct. To see a full timeline of accusations, investigations, and lawsuits related to the school's hazing scandal, visit our website, WTTW.com/news. A Chicago-based artist created a series of work about her homeland, Puerto Rico, and her migration to her adopted hometown. Edra Soto makes temporary public sculptures that evoke island culture and architecture. Her artwork has been exhibited in Brazil, Cuba, and the Whitney Museum in New York City. Producer Mark Vitale recently caught up with her in Hyde Park. Here's another look.
The big garage doors of the Hyde Park Art Center are open, welcoming visitors into an immersive structure. Architectural motifs mirror patterns seen on houses in Puerto Rico. A hand-fabricated domino table reflects a popular pastime on the island. And there are photographs embedded in the work. The project is called Graft, not the political kind, but a transplant, an offshoot planted in a new place.
I have been working on the series Graft for a decade now. The word graft comes out of my necessity of create something that represents my migration. My distance from Puerto Rico affects and informs the way I see Puerto Rico. I think it meant something very different when I lived there, and what it means now is impacted by my migration and that experience of living Puerto Rico.
A closer look at some works reveals viewfinders with tiny photos of Puerto Rico.
When you think about migration, that is not one single experience or feeling. Migration comes with grief and loss and negotiations of that journey.
Soto grew up in Puerto Rico. She moved to Chicago 25 years ago and got her MFA from the School of the Art Institute. She makes ephemeral artwork out of tape, tin, plywood, and plastic. and she reuses materials. Parts of this work were previously in a pond at the Chicago Botanic Garden.
I describe it as architectural interventions. It's a symbolic transplant. I call it graft because for me, graft, the word coming from skin transplant, I kept thinking about it as a really accurate way of representing my sentiment as somebody that migrated from Puerto Rico.
For Latino Voices, this is Mark Vitale.
Ezra Soto's artwork will be at the Hyde Park Art Center through Sunday. And that's our show for tonight. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And if you're watching us on Friday night, know that you can also catch Latino Voices and Black Voices on Saturdays beginning at 6 p.m. And don't forget, you can catch my reporting on 91.5 FM, WBEZ. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, I'm Michael Puente. Stay healthy, stay safe. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.
Next time.
He's positively ancient.
Sister Boniface thinks uncovered remains could be Viking.
Well, that's a question for an archaeologist.
But it turns out they're much more recent.
Oh, I don't like where this is going.
And identifying the victim,
missing persons for the last 3 years,
will be as difficult as determining the murder weapon.
Cause of death?